Hi there, this is Shrikant Dasare. So, in this lesson, we are going to look into the various ways to define a variable in Java programming language, the various ways and rules which a programmer should keep in mind when he is writing programs and defining variables. So, first, let me launch the IDE. So, as we know that we are using NetBeans 8.0 installed in my computer. So, NetBeans takes a moment to load even though the how good your system configuration is. Okay, it's loading, takes a minute to load all the time. Oh, okay, so first let us create a new project here. File new project, uh, Java application. So let's name our project as variables. Okay, somewhat meaningful name since we are going to study about the various rules of defining a variable. Okay, so NetBeans takes the privilege of creating all the program project structure for us, and closing the remaining projects which are open here already. Okay, so here we have a project with name variables and package, again a package. NetBeans creates by default with the name of the project and creates a .java file with the name of our project here. Okay, variables.java. Okay, so first let us get rid of all these comments here. Okay, okay, so here we have okay, so let's make some room. Okay, so the variable is the most basic data structure which is used to store some data. Okay, so after all, program is used to process the program is set of instructions. Okay, the set of instructions. So we write programs to process on some data here. Okay, so data that data should be stored in the form of variable here. Okay, so the variable is the one which is in which the value changes or varies accordingly. Okay, so values variable is a name given to a memory location. You can also take the definition of variable like this: name given to a memory location where the data is stored. Okay, so the first, there are certain rules in defining a variable. So the first one is it should start with a letter or an alphabet. It should start with a letter. Okay, it should only start with a letter or comma underscore, comma underscore, and dollar here. Okay, so although it's legal to have underscore and dollar at the beginning of the variable names, mostly majority programmers prefer not to use underscore and dollar at the beginning of the variable name here. Okay, so according to our first rule, so the valid variable name, so valid variable names are like this: my int myvar. So take it, since Java is a strictly typed programming language, so we need to specify the name of the data type when we are defining a variable here. Okay, so here Java is a strictly typed programming language, which means that it's mandate to define or specify the type of the data type, the type of the data before the variable name here. Okay, so this in this way, so this is a perfectly legal variable name here. Okay, it started with a letter. So if you violate this first rule, and if you say something like this, if you start with a digit and it's already it shows this red squiggly line, which means that it's a compilation error. So if you run this program, okay, so it doesn't run. Okay, so even though it runs, it shows some errors here. Okay, so it's not a good practice, nor it's a violation to have a digit at the beginning. Okay, so it should start with a letter or underscore. Okay, so let's see another variable as an example. Let's say myvar2 here. Okay, so this is also perfectly legal. And the third form, the first rule is you can have an underscore at the beginning of your variable. It's perfectly legal, but these two are not a good practice. Okay, so not a good convention or not a good practice, to use underscore. Okay, so let's make it in a quotation here, to use underscore, so at the beginning of variable here. Okay, so it's not a good practice. In the same way, it's not a good practice to have dollar at the beginning of your variable name. Okay, so majority of the programmers, or it's not a good convention to follow, to use either dollar or underscore, even though it's perfectly valid and legal. Okay, so the second rule of thumb is, so no special characters. So no special characters except, okay, so except underscore and dollar are allowed in variable names here. Okay, so it's not valid to have, it's invalid to have special symbols like percent or hash. So if you think you can use a variable name like this, it's not legal here. Okay, so immediately it shows this red line, which ultimately shows that it's not legal to have underscore. Okay, so if at all you want any special symbol, so you are only allowed in Java to use in the variable name only underscore and dollar. Okay, so except these two special symbols, you are not allowed to use any other special symbol. Okay, so it's not valid. So let's take it wantedly and let's comment it out. Okay, so let's say it's not a valid variable name. So not a valid variable name. Okay, since we are using it, so hash. Okay, it's not allowed in Java to have a special symbol other than underscore and dollar. Not a valid variable name here. Okay, so the third rule of thumb, is there should be no spaces. There should be no spaces in between the variable names here. Okay, so that means that so if your variable name consists of two parts here. Okay, so if you want to have a variable name something like this. Okay, so int and car speed here. Okay, so car speed, so if you want to have a variable name like this, so it's not allowed to have spaces in between the variable names. Okay, so if you want, so you need to make it in a single word, or if you want to differentiate distinguish these two variables into a one variable, you can do it by having an underscore or dollar here. Okay, so again, using dollar for this purpose is not a good convention or not a good practice. So majority of the programmers prefer to keep underscore in order to distinguish the strings or the words between the variable name here. Okay, so it's illegal to have spaces between the variable names here. Okay, so it's always a good practice to to have an underscore. Okay, so another good convention is that when you are having two different names, two different strings for a variable name, it's always a good convention to have the second word with a capital letter here. Okay, so this is also known as a camel case. It's a good convention to follow here. Okay, so spaces are not allowed in between the variable names. If at all, if you want to have a space, so you need to join them with an underscore here. Okay, so the next and last and final rule of thumb when you're defining a variable names is should not use keywords. Okay, should not use keywords as variable names here. Okay, so there are a collection of keywords which have a specialized meaning in the programming language like Java and C++. Every language has a set of keywords. Okay, so they have their own specialized meaning. So normally programming languages like Java, C or C++ don't allow keywords to use keywords as variable names here. Okay, so as variable names. Okay, so it's illegal to say something like this. If you say int and for, okay, So int and for, it's not legal to have for, because for is a keyword which is used for for loop. So until now we have seen you cannot use int and float also like this. Okay, so float is a data type keyword first, and then it's also a data type. So if you want, it's not legal to have a keyword here. Okay, so let's write it and comment it out. Okay, not a valid variable name. Let's comment it out and write not a valid variable name here. Okay, so not allowed to have keywords. So if you want to check what are the keywords that are used in Java programming language, so Google is your friend. If you open the browser window, again it's taking a moment since my system is very ancient. It's getting loaded. Google. So if you go to Google and if you type Java and keywords here, okay. So if you say Java and keywords, if you go to the second site here, the Oracle website, since Oracle is maintaining the Java documentation, so here you have a list of bunch of keywords here. Okay, so while defining variables, you need to keep in mind that you never use any of them as your variable name here. Okay, so to go back to IDE, so these are the four major rules while you have to keep in mind while defining a variable. So okay, so defining and declaring are two different things. Okay, so if you just define a variable like this, int and mind, okay, it's just defining. Okay, so it becomes a declaration. So if you say a variable name, if you take a variable name int mind2 is equal to 20, so this becomes a declaration. Okay, so this becomes a declaration because you are assigning some value with the help of assignment operator here. Okay, so if you observe, so this is a declaration, example of a declaration. Let's have a comment here also, declaration of a variable, declaration of a variable. Okay, so this is defining a variable. So two main defining a variable. So as a programmer, you need to know the difference between these two. Defining is just telling the compiler that you are using a variable of name mind here. Okay, so the declaration is different. When you assign some value to it, the compiler assigns some address and it allocates some memory, and a whole lot of things happens in the background here. Okay, there should, misspell the word here, there should be no spaces between the variable names here. Okay, so let's type it, mistake here, between the variable names. Okay. So one more thing, so now if you want to print it out, the value that is stored inside the variable here, okay, since we have declared a variable here using a assignment operator, let's print that value to the output screen here. System.out.println, okay, and let's have some message, the value of my underscore int 2. So all these messages are just for understanding purpose. Now we have to use this plus symbol here, which acts as a concatenation operator. Okay, so this is a string literal, and we have to combine that string literal with our name of the variable in order to print the value 20 here. Okay, so if you write like this, so both the strings, so both different both different things were joined using the concatenation operator here. Okay, so if you look into the output, you understand better. So let me run the program. So here you have the value of my 2 is equal to 20. Okay, so in the same way, so if you want to look what is stored inside the mind also, so we have just defined variable, and just if you want to print the contents of that variable too. So again, you can use the system.out.println statement, and you can have a message here also, the value, so the value of my int is equal to plus my int here. Okay, so now showing us an error might not have been initialized here. Okay, so it's showing us an error here. Okay, so because the variable, so here we have used is not initialized. Okay, so if you don't initialize, the compiler gets confused and it cannot automatically print out the data is stored inside it here. Okay, So if at all you want to use the variable, you need to initialize with some value to that here. Okay, so if you can say something like this, mind 1, so and then you have some value stored inside the variable to print it out. Okay, so this is the basic stuff about the various ways to define a variable in Java, and how to assign, how to define a variable, and how to declare a variable, how to just print out the contents stored inside the variable here. Okay, so to summarize once again, there are mainly 4 different rules to keep in mind when you are defining a variable. The first one is, if the variable name should only start with a letter or an alphabet or underscore or dollar. So these 3 things are perfectly legal to do in Java, but even though majority of the programmers don't prefer to use start their variable names with underscore or dollar. Okay, so almost these 2 things are not a good convention and they are ruled out. Okay, and the second important rule is no special symbol except dollar and underscore are allowed at the beginning, in the middle, or at the end of the variable name. Okay, so the third rule is there should be no spaces while defining a variable. So if you want to, if at all you want to distinguish the 2 different words used inside a variable name, you need to use the underscore symbol. Okay, another good convention is to use a camel case. The camel case is nothing but like this. So if you have 2 different words inside a variable name, so you can have the second string or second word starting letter can be capitalized. Okay, so this is a good convention. Good convention to have the second letter or the second word, the starting letter of the second word to be capitalized here. Okay. The fourth rule is there should no keyword should be used as variable name here. Okay, so the keywords are the one which have some special meaning, which are always reserved words. Keywords are reserved words. So if you go to Google and type keywords in Google, the keywords in Java, so you have a list of keywords here. So keeping that in mind while defining a variable should not throw you into an error here. Okay. So this is the basic stuff about the variables in Java. So see you in the next lesson. Goodbye.